Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb. I am the redneck. You bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to get you to do it too. And a reminder that when we say go green on this program, we're not just talking about environmentalism. We're talking about deep ecology, a recognition that everything in life is interconnected. And whether you come at that from a hard science perspective, or you come at that from an eco-spiritual feminist perspective, or like me, you say both of those are valid ways of understanding the world. The fact is, anything that we do to this web of life, we are ultimately doing to ourselves. And right about now, y'all, we are fucking it up. And on that cheerful note, let's bring in Shane Knight. Shane, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good, my man. Another typical Monday, but in this world, that's
exactly another typical Monday as fascism asserts and takes control over all aspects of the government. And what we're going to do right now is jump right in to bring our good friend Mel Figueroa back to the program. Mel, you may remember, is with the Democracy Collaborative. Mel has helped to create something called Tracking the Crisis. Mel Figueroa, welcome back to Redneck Gone Green.
Thanks, Shane and David. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff that's probably a little bit kind of tough to kind of parse through, because there's just it's a lot of stuff, a lot of turnarounds and all of that kind of stuff.
So Mel, before you jump in, I want to give you an opportunity to describe what the movement tracker is, the Tracking the Crisis. Let folks know how they can subscribe, because I like what you say. You're reading the news so we don't have to.
That's right. It's a little bit like taping my eyes open and staring into the abyss. But, I'm doing it because a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed, and that's kind of the point, right? Steve Bannon, Trump, their strategy is to overwhelm us so they can roll over us with whatever they got. So, I take it as my job to kind of go through everything and try to make sense of it so that other people can make sense of it too, so that we're not overwhelmed and that we can kind of see the threads of what's going on so we can do something about it. Okay, so I'm trying to present my screen, but it's not quite going on here. Oh, here we go. All right, so we're going to start off with the tariffs, and I know there's a lot of movement on the tariffs. Every day something new is going on, but we'll start with, again, last week, on Wednesday, April 9th, the tariffs officially took effect on most of the world, as you see here, but only for about 4 hours, because afterwards, Trump went back on it and announced the 90-day pause on most tariffs except for China, Canada, and Mexico. In fact, he, China, the U.S. and China actually escalated their war, so that as of now, the tariffs stand at our tariffs against China are 145%, and China's tariffs against the U.S. is 125%. That's huge in that, as we all know, a lot of our stuff is made in China, and so that's a huge hit to our economy. Next slide here. As this, what it's done is basically the stock markets went into a total roller coaster. And if you're I'm not an investor, I don't have money, but other people who do were really in a tizzy, and still have been. As you can see, that drop on the right was when he announced the tariffs, and then when he took them back, they went way back up as like the biggest one-day gain in I think almost one of the biggest one-day gains in history.
But not to the level it was before. Let's be clear about that.
Oh, yes, exactly. I mean, this is what some economists might call a dead cat bounce, which is one of my favorite economic terms. But really, the story here is not really the stocks, but the bonds. And so I want to explain this graph a little bit here. You can see it's going up, but in bond markets, that is not a good thing. When bond yields spike, as you might hear in the news, that's not a good thing. It means that so many people are getting rid of U.S. dollars that the dollar value is collapsing so rapidly that they have to hike up the yields in order to get people to hang on to the dollar. So what this spike really means is the desperation because people are selling off US dollars at such a high volume that the value of the dollar is actually falling, and that makes us that makes us that puts us in a lot of trouble. Let's just say. What this also means is that what we're actually starting to see is what's called capital flight from the United States. A lot of economic journalists have been talking about exit America, sell America. Basically, investment is flying from the United States at a record rate because people don't know what's going on. There's too much uncertainty around it. And that up our chance of recession and depression. Even JP Morgan, that big old capitalist, is saying, I don't know about investing in America right now, everybody. So but what's happened with Trump is that a lot of people are starting to look at it because right before he announced that he was rolling back the tariffs, he went on social media and told everybody now is a great time to buy because stocks are really low. And then once he announced it, like the stock shot up, so people who listened to him made a ton of money. In fact, and this is the big thing where a lot of people are thinking there's a lot of insider trading going on, is if you look at the volume of calls that went into NASDAQ to buy, the calls rose about 10 minutes before the announcement went public. That's why a lot of people are thinking that somebody got tipped off. And in fact, Trump was bragging that his friends made 2.5 billion and his other friend made 900 million. Isn't it great? You guys, market manipulation is illegal, and especially when you're the president of the United States. So AOC,
half the shit that Cheeto all these motherfuckers done is illegal. Why would you think they're not going to continue doing this?
Well, this is the interesting thing. And again, in my opinion, there's a couple of things going on. Number one, Trump is trying to start a trade war with China, which is not a good idea. China's had 9,000 years of mercantile experience. And number two, one of the things he's done is actually pissed off the capitalists. So, that's a really interesting thing going on, because capital is a huge power and might might be a power that could check him, but we'll see, unless they're the people who were tipped off, of course. So, so that's it for the tariffs right now. I know it's, there's a lot of stuff, but if there's any questions, any clarifications, I'm happy to,
Well, Mel, I want you to stick around so that you can join a conversation with our next guest, because I am really excited to be bringing into this conversation Ted Rall. Ted is America's most widely syndicated alternative editorial cartoonist. He's won the RFK Journalism Award twice. He's a Pulitzer Prize finalist. His cartoons and illustrations have appeared in Time, Newsweek, USA Today, Rolling Stone, Esquire, the Wall Street Journal, and the Village Voice. And he's a regular contributor, or was, to Mad Magazine. He does what's called comics journalism, because he doesn't merely do cartoons, but he literally does journalism through the medium of comics, and has filed stories from Cuba, Myanmar, Kashmir, Afghanistan, Quebec. He's also an author of over 20 books. He is really one of the, and I really believe this to be true, the last of the true leftist political journalists. Ted Rall, welcome back to Redneck Gone Green.
Thanks. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
You betcha. So Ted, I don't know if you can flip your phone around, but we are actually looking at your computer screen right now.
Are you really? It's a good thing. Let's see. How do I do that? Okay.
Well, at least we know what you're working on.
That's
Yeah,
right.
exactly. At least you can see I'm not doing anything weird. Okay, that's very strange. Here we go. I think I've got it. Okay.
Yeah, you
There we
did.
go.
All right. Good job. Well, and I always say, hey, thank you for letting me bring my mama, which is Southern for grandmother, into the material plane. She helped to raise me. And mama used to always say when something like came up, oh, did that mistake happen? I hope that's the worst thing that happens today. What a great day you'll have. And it's always helped me.
She sounds great.
Well, look at here, Ted. You heard Mel Figueroa give us the breakdown, and you have a particular skill set on taking complex matters and distilling them in ways that people understand. So I'm going to kick it to you. Did you understand what the hell Mel Figueroa said? And if so, help our listeners, viewers here on Redneck Gone Green understand what we're actually dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did, and I think it helped that I used to work on Wall Street before journalism took off, or took off is a relative term when you're talking about journalism. But no, so I mean, capital flight is a really interesting phenomenon, right? It's like where investors and people and consumers and money traders all kind of decide that a country just isn't worth investing in anymore because there's too much risk. And, when I worked on Wall Street from 1984 to 1990, not that long, but I did get to see the 1987 stock market crash from behind a trading floor computer. And, the thing is that you don't really usually see what we're seeing now, which is the stock market goes down and then bonds go down and the US dollar goes down all at the same time. Normally, if the stock market crashes, there's capital flight, but into what they call like a quest for security, right? Safety, and there's usually safety in U.S. Treasury bonds and notes. There's usually safety in the U.S. dollar, the world's reserve currency, and here you have basically nothing. It feels safe, and that is a really scary thing for investors. And it doesn't mean we're all going to be eating out of dumpsters soon, but it doesn't mean we're not going to be. But it's just, it is super, it is definitely something that we should be paying close attention to, because it is it's an unusual situation. I mean, and Trump is taking some big chances with the global economy.
Ted, my read is that, I'm being completely sincere when I say, I don't think Donald Trump actually understands macroeconomics. I think that he's got a very antiquated understanding and is operating under some assumptions that are simply not true and haven't been true for at least 50 years around how the global economy works. The second thing I want to lift up, Ted, what you said, which I completely agree with, and that is that the reason that we're seeing all three of those monetary units begin to fall at the same time is because the US dollar is not perceived by the billionaire class as a safe investment anymore. And that is causing repercussions. And if Mel, if you're still here, I want to bring you into this conversation, because I know that the graphs that you put up in some of the conversations that you've had, I'm going to get you to grade my papers, both you, Ted, and Mel. Have I got this right?
Pretty much. I mean, one of the things that, that I think Trump is banking on with this trade war with China is kind of the misplaced notion that he thinks that they need us more than we need them. And that is not the case. One of the things that we've also been seeing this week is that, as the tariffs went by and it hit a lot of other countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh and, all of that stuff. China's been going around and being, hey, you guys come to daddy. One of the Chinese students actually explained it. While the U.S. has been using their wealth, from the U.S.-China relationship to enrich their billionaires, buy yachts, do all, invest in real estate, and impoverish the rest of us. What China has been doing is building infrastructure, roads, social services, all the stuff that actually the U.S. was doing after World War II to build a powerful and prosperous middle class. I remember I was teaching at Berkeley in 2015 when the Chinese stock market collapsed, and I was teaching a summer class with a bunch of Chinese students, and I was talking about 2008, and I was like, what are you guys gonna do? The stock market's collapsed, and they're looking at me like, so, like what, And what I found out, because I was so intrigued by their response, I actually did a survey and I asked them about it. And what I found out is that in China, they are not at all as dependent on the stock market as we are. Our retirement funds are all caught up in the stock market. Our mortgages, almost every aspect of our lives is caught up in the stock market. So when a financial collapse happens, we are all screwed, In China, what they have is, little kiosks in the mall where the grandmas with pocket money can go. It's like a slot machine. They'll go and play the stock market like they play the slot machine. They do it with extra cash. They don't do it with the things that they actually need. So China is so much more prepared to weather a global economic crisis than the U.S. is. And that's really the big risk here.
Ted, I want to see if that's tracking for you, because I know, again, you have a very unique position as somebody who is both involved with Wall Street and a leftist journalist. Is this tracking what Mel Figueroa is sharing?
100%. Yeah. The Chinese economic model is so different. Even though they've converted over to capitalism after Deng Xiaoping in the death of Mao Zedong in the late 70s, it is basically a capitalist society with a lot of communist signs hanging around. But that said, it's also they still have a sense of social cohesion and economic cohesion that we just don't understand in this ruggedly individualistic, sort of gangster capitalism system that we have here. There's the idea that you would invest retirement funds, for example, in the whims of the stock market in China would be, or many other countries would be considered absolutely insane.
And what we're seeing here really is the aspect of the fact that the U.S. stock market and Wall Street really is a casino gambling system, right? And it's I've
meant to work that way. It's meant to be that way. That's the point of it. And so it's like when it's just behaving as it was designed. And I think the thing that's interesting. I mean, there are some. Look, let's say the dollar remains weak. That's not all bad. I mean, it's going to suck if for Americans who travel overseas, but it means that it means that we'll be able to we'll get more export business, right? But I wanted to get back to something that you said earlier about these being the economics of 50 or 60 years ago. I grew up in the Rust Belt. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, which was completely devastated by deindustrialization. NAFTA, WTO, GATT these were the last nails in the coffin of the town that I grew up in that was an economic powerhouse, 75 to 100 years ago. NCR was the big company in my town. And at one point in the 1950s and 60s, 90% of every middle and upper executive at every Fortune 500 company in the United States had graduated from the NCR Management Training School. I mean, Dayton was a colossus, and it's wrecked now. I mean, they're literally running out of places to store the bodies of all the young men and women who are dying from opioid, overdoses. It's a disaster, and so I'm highly sympathetic to protectionism and keeping good working class jobs. Where people can, with a high school degree, can make six figures and send their kids to college. That's awesome. But the problem is that we needed these policies back in the 60s and 70s. And now it's too late. The horse is out of the globalization barn. There's nothing we can do now. I'm thinking if I'm a factory, I want to build a factory in Dayton. Like I have the money to do it. I don't know who. First of all, it's going to take years to get it built, and by then Trump will not be president. And I don't even think a President Vance is going to continue the same policies. So I'm just going to be like, why am I doing this? There's no point to it. It's like the idea is, oh, if I, can they make, and the tariffs in a sense are not high enough to really protect those jobs and make it to the point where you're just not going to import anything from overseas, because the cost differential is so massive in terms of sourcing stuff from Malaysia versus Ohio. I just don't see. I don't see how it works. I want it to work. I want to go in a time machine to 1965 and have Donald Trump do all of this, but we can't do that.
And I just want to take a moment too, because as somebody who, the tear gas smell is off of my clothing, but I got tear gassed at the protest against the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and the World Trade Organization, where, Ted, you might have been there in Seattle, where me and about 50,000 of my closest friends shut that damn city down, right? But we lost that global justice movement. But I want to go just a little bit before that and just remind me again, who was the president who forced the North American Free Trade Agreement down our throats? Who was that?
William Jefferson, I believe, was his name.
That was indeed Bill Clinton, the Democrat, who was able to accomplish what Ronald Reagan was not able to do, and that was to force NAFTA down our throats. And I submit this to you, y'all. Like, Bill Clinton turned me into a Green Party member because I saw how he had made a deal with the devil. And that deal was to get in bed with the capitalist, with the industrialist, with Wall Street, because he said, oh, these voters have nowhere else to go. So he triangulated against us. We started a race to the bottom for both environmental protection as well as worker protection that we're still reeling from. And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And now, after the Citizens United decision, what we're talking about is just a shell of any democratic sensibility that we have in this country. So, my way of thinking is this, y'all. We are going to have to build a mass disruptive power that uses all the tools, right? Malcolm X famously said, by any means necessary. And I want to remind you that means all the means, right? It means electoral politics. It means media like this. It means direct action. We're going to have to rethink how we operate. And if I welcome anybody who feels like I am overstating the case or I am being overly dramatic, please help me see it differently, because I don't like what I'm looking at, but what I'm looking at is disaster.
I want to point out one more thing about the period before, globalization wrecked everything, and that Trump isn't even seeing, is that one of the things that made a strong middle class in the decades in the 20th century, right, was not just tariffs. Tariffs was not the only thing. It was strong unionization, right? People in unions fighting for workers' rights was what made the middle class strong. And Trump is going in the absolute opposite direction when it comes to unions and employment and workers' rights. In fact, Florida is because of the mass deportations. Florida is thinking about bringing child labor back. So it's taking us back to the 1890s or something like that. But I do want to say, when we're talking about what David's talking about, really the time period we should be looking at is the 1930s, when you had militant strikes, sit-in strikes, major worker mobilizations that actually turned the United States back from the brink of fascism and into social democracy. So, history buffs, I'd say look at the 30s right now.
Well, you ain't got to go that far back. You can go look at Argentina and what they're doing right fucking now.
That's right.
Listen,
right.
I think it's worth, and I'm glad you brought that up, Shane. I tell people all the time, man, like one of the great benefits of doing any travel outside of the U.S., especially into the global South, go and talk to social change agents, go and talk to activists, go and talk to ordinary folks on the street. You don't have to convince them of the horrors of imperialism or capitalism, right? they live it and understand it. It's part of the reason why the rest of the world is so far ahead of us, because they do not tolerate what we have been taught to tolerate. And Mel, I want to give you the opportunity on the tracking the crisis, because I know there are a couple of other things that happened this week that I want to give you a chance to frame them out, and then I want to hear Ted react to them. Mel, hit it.
Let's see. I think I've got to put this thing back into the studio. Here we go. So a few more things. More universities and students have been targeted with revoked visas. Over 640 students at 120 colleges in over half of U.S. states. So that map is where students are being targeted at schools. A lot of students just literally got a text to just leave the country immediately and self-deport. As we can see, like other students such as Rumeza Ozturk and Mahmoud Khalil were just snatched off the street by ICE agents. So that's a huge thing. The mass deportation program intensifies, and there was a Border Expo trade show in Arizona with a lot of private contractors in which Todd Lyons, the ICE director, talked about, this mass deportation system. He talked about trucks going up and down like Amazon Prime, but with human beings. I mean, do I need to comment on how that comes off? Also, a lot of private contractors are making tons of money, like Avelo Airlines and Geo Group, off of the mass deportation system. Trump also this week rescinded protections for almost 1 million migrants who asylum seekers who came to the U.S. through a Biden-era program called CBP-1. All of their visas, again, were immediately revoked. The app itself was converted from a work license and legal process system to a self-deportation system on the app itself. And so that puts at least 1 million migrants at risk for immediate deportation.
So Ted, I want to bring you into the conversation, because one of the things that, look, I got to say, when I was beginning my political education, your fantastic comic strip was both funny and helpful to me. But what brought you to my attention more recently is the recent DMZ America podcast, where you tackled the question, is it time to leave the USA? And confronted the question, is America and the United States veering into fascism? So as we hear all of this, I want to put it to you bluntly, like, how close are we to fascism, in your opinion?
I think we're close. The system is moving very quickly past authoritarianism into sort of the classic aspects of fascism that we studied in school, right? I mean, we already have a cult of militarism in this country that goes back at least to 9/11 and the USA Patriot Act and all that. Every time you see a talking head on television, wearing a fancy uniform, and someone says, "Thank you for your service," and it's probably someone who probably never even served in combat. That is that's militarism at work. You've got when you have masked anonymous goons driving unmarked rental cars, dragging people off the street, and you don't even know really who they are. They don't show ID or anything, no business card, nothing. That certainly feels a lot like fascism. When you have a scapegoated group, in this case, let's face it, there's an ethnic component to this, right? I mean, they're going after a lot of Latino people, and they want to target 1 million people. We kind of know what the racial coding is here, and so the administration is trying to, and Trump in particular, has been very loudly declaiming Latino people who as bad people in this country. So yeah, it's fascism. I mean, especially when you see the attempt to merge institutions that heretofore have been like very private, right? Like, so big colleges and universities like Columbia University, where I went to school, and major law firms that have been now shaken down for $1 trillion in free pro bono legal work, which the Trump and his cronies can basically dole out to, for anything they want. It's basically like it's like an ultimate like discount coupon for them to go out and have another January 6th. And, these firms would have to defend these people, that sort of thing. They could do anything. They could defend the president if and when he leaves office. He's talking about not leaving office. Some people are like, well, maybe he's trolling. So whether it's time to leave the United States or not, I think depends on whether you feel like you're in personal danger. I feel like it's my patriotic responsibility to stick around as long as possible until me or people close to me are, in real danger, as opposed to sort of you never know danger.
Ted, I'm gonna jump in here because thank you so much for that clarity, that candor, and the courage of what you said. Because I want to be clear, I'm staying right here and fighting it out. And maybe that's just my own redneck sensibilities, but I'll be damned and go to hell before I let some grifter carnival barker like him, run me out. So I'm here to fight. And I reckon that listeners and viewers of Redneck Gone Green are going to join me in that same sort of approach. And Mel, I want to bring you back into the conversation because, you and I want to lift you up, Mel, because when you and I were doing Movement School for Revolutionaries, traveling around the country back in 2016 or 2017, January 2017, we kicked them off. You helped me to actually see what was happening under Trump administration 1. Which was a series of basic attempts to undermine the democratic sensibilities and structures that were already in place. And you were reminding me and having me look back at the 1930s that were going on there. And you said something that really resonated with me. And that is, look, yeah, we're all at least Mel and I are both punch a fascist, right? Like we're pro punch a fascist. But you don't defeat fascism by just punching individual fascists. You can only defeat fascism by creating a society where the seeds of fascism cannot grow, because fascism does not mean just jackbooted thugs and these horrific policies. Fascism only works if you have a large social base that's going along with it. And the reason they're going along with it is because these damn neoliberal Democrats have created the conditions for it. Mel, I want you to break that part down because I thought that your ability to do that really helped me to see what the hell was going on.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is to understand that all of this didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't like Trump showed up and all of a sudden everybody went crazy. Again, we had 40 years of I like to say I'm as old as neoliberalism. We've had almost 50 years of what Ted was talking about before, deindustrialization, people's jobs just dropping out under them, the erosion of social safety nets, all of that stuff. You have a populace that is scared and angry, right? On top of that, we also have had a society that has conditioned people to throw people away. Look at people's attitudes towards unhoused people in the United States. Look at people's attitudes towards, Black people are still getting, killed by police every single day, But when you have people who are scared, broke, and angry, that was the phrase I was trying to think of from our thing. You have people who are scared, broke, and angry. You have a media that does not explain why we are scared, broke, and angry. And then you have populations that we have been conditioned through the mainstream media to think of as less than, as throwaways. Think about Palestinian children right now, right? That there are people who are not just that we are conditioned to not just not care about as much, but then when somebody like Trump comes in and starts to actually scapegoat those people, then a wall comes down. And I talked about this a lot because I've, at Berkeley, as the students, as people who did want to punch a Nazi and was okay with that, we found ourselves on the other side of that wall. A wall comes down between the people who are allowed to live and the people who the people would let die. And as we go, we have to think about that, surprisingly difficult task of valuing everybody in this time period when we're all scared, broke, and angry.
So, Ted, I want to get you to react to, we've got an active comments going on the channel. Chris, throw this one up. Greg, who's a frequent viewer listener, says, might be time for a digital version of Paul Revere and maybe revival of the Underground Railroad. How about a segment on how to safely navigate this Orwellian world? As somebody who has traveled globally and, again, is a comic journalist, I'm curious how that lands for you.
It lands well. I wrote a column this week that's called "What is Resistance?" And I talked about like how one of the reasons that one of the problems that the left has is that obviously we don't have an organized resistance party, like a socialist party, a leftist party, a communist party. I mean, the Green Party that you mentioned and that I voted for in the last 3 elections it's not even on the ballot in every state, and it's not really capable of organizing the level of mass resistance that's necessary. But I wanted to sort of just say, like, in real resistance movements, you have to be willing to put your body at risk ultimately between the forces of oppression in the state and the victims, and that might mean, for example, hiding, illegal immigrants, migrants, whatever you want to call them, who are being sought by the state. It's really, really hard because the surveillance state is so pervasive now that there's, millions of cameras all over in every city. It's not impossible to get away with, but it's really, really hard. And so, I mean, and now people don't even know. There's a federal law that makes it illegal to give aid and comfort to someone knowingly who is here illegally. So obviously there's ways around that too. But, I have to think ultimately there's strength in numbers. I don't think, Americans fundamentally, I think, they, like the Germans in the 30s and 40s, they can succumb to stupidity and cruelty. But when the fever breaks, fundamentally, we're good people. And like, I think we want to be good people, but they need to feel like their safety in numbers. They need to feel that we need a grassroots organization that's going to make us feel like if I stick my head out and I get snatched up by Trump's goons for some reason, that there's going to be people there who's going to care about me and maybe come in with bail money or surround the jailhouse. Right now, I think you feel like, if you're like that lawyer in Detroit who was apprehended on his way back from vacation in the Caribbean with his family, and they took his phone and tried to get information about his clients, who include a University of Michigan student who was protesting the Israel's war against Gaza. That guy probably didn't probably feel that he had a support structure when he was in that ICE, in that Border and Customs Enforcement office at Detroit Airport. If they had kept him, I don't think he could have expected 10,000 people to show up and surround the airport. That's what's missing. That's what we need to start working on.
And thank you so much for saying that, Ted. And it does remind me, Mario Savio's incredible speech from back in the day. And I want to quote it. That's the mode of civil disobedience. Quote, there's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you simply can't take part. You can't even passively watch and take part. You've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. You've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. And that, I think, is what you're calling us to, Ted and Mel. What, as I'm listening to the two of you, I I am doing my best here on Redneck Gone Green to use this program and this as part of a resistance movement to say it is not enough to simply critique. We are going to have to get into the streets the way we did in the global justice movement of the 90s. We're going to have to get into the street the way the civil rights movement did. We've got to take ourselves as a resistance more seriously. And
And
that
it can't
means
be just, and it can't be like once every 3 months on a sunny Saturday.
exactly. And I'll tell you, I
That's
got to say, and if Nancy Pelosi is scheduled to show up and speak at your rally, you should question what the hell that rally is actually about. Like, make no mistake about the fact that it was neoliberals like Nancy Pelosi who created the conditions to allow this to begin.
Yeah, those people like Move On that organize the hands off
Mhm.
rallies. Look, even if we want to say, look, it's always a good thing when people are out in the streets protesting, injustice. I'm not going to take anything away from them, but the organizations like Move On are just not grassroots organizations that are able to build a sustained grassroots populist movement. They can put together an event every now and then, like a concert promoter, but they can't make things happen on the street.
No, I like to say sometimes that the version of social movements that we get in school and everything is a very sanitized version. It's almost like the Disney movie version. Like, you hold up a sign, there's a great rally, and then everything is saved. And that's not the case. A lot of times, like, social change happens when there is leverage. I mean, you would know that in any kind of like power struggle with anybody, whether it's an abusive person in your life, or
Or a
a
gunfight.
workplace, right? Yeah. like a shitty boss. The thing about it is leverage. And again, during the 30s, there were sit down strikes. I keep thinking about sit down strikes when we see all of these federal workers getting fired. And actually, this week there was a Social Security worker who was literally dragged out of his desk by Doge because I'm thinking about, like, what are the types of leverage we can use now to force power to again, I'm going to get this wrong. Frederick Douglass said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand," and so it doesn't work like a Disney movie. It doesn't work of like speaking truth to power, and all of a sudden people are going to be like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that I'm oppressing you." That's not how it works, right? We have to force them to their knees through disruption and through using those powers of leverage that we the people have, and we do have them.
And
And that's
also, we got to make them miserable. I mean, like, for example, look, USAID, I'm not going to get into what their mission was around the world, which I don't, was imperfect. Let's just put it that way, right? But the point is, if you're a worker at a federal worker, like let's say a Parks Department worker or a USAID anywhere, and you've been illegally terminated, your division's been eliminated without congressional approval, why are you leaving? Make them come and you stay there. It's like, you can't fire me. You're not in a position. Who are you? You're not my boss. You can't fire me. So I'm staying here. I mean, in France a few years ago, there were factories taken over by their workers. It went on for like the better part of a month. Ultimately, they won. And, it's about making them miserable. That's why I'm kind of like, I hate Saturday rallies where you go and protest to a bunch of empty buildings. Make the powers that be miserable.
I'm
I love the
reminded.
French. I love the French example, and I love what they did. They got to get a couple of years ago. You remember when the electrical union struck in Paris and they shut down the electricity to the whole first and
It's so excellent.
Yeah, that was so inspirational. And then the burning of the Tesla dealership a couple of weeks back. And I get that wasn't really like the conglomerate of the French people, but at the same time, they really know how to fucking burn shit down. And I love it.
Yeah, they do. They sure do.
I'm reminded of Utah Phillips. May the goddess hold him close. Utah Phillips famously said, "The earth is not dying. She is being killed. And those who are killing the earth have names and addresses." And, from my way of thinking, when I hear Ted Rall exhort us that we've got to exercise power and we've got to make them miserable, like we've got to make them miserable. We've got to, and again, it's not just as Mel says, going out in the streets and holding up a sign. I'm all for that. I've done it and I will continue to do it. I like to say though, I don't organize people to have events. I have events to organize people. What I'm interested in doing is getting with folks who are willing to do disruptive, nonviolent civil disobedience. Make this machine stop. At the end of the day, this moment is rife with crisis, but also opportunity. And frankly, I have not seen the left operate as if there are opportunities for us. And I actually think there are opportunities, not just to resist, but to actually advance.
I agree. I gotta say, I really have been impressed by people's ability to actually stand up and do something similar to boycotting Tesla. That seems to have had some sense of an effect. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but he seems to be really sad and a little upset that he's lost some money. But it really makes me feel good to see that.
In fact, I have a slide for that if you want to put it up.
Yeah, throw it. Go do it.
That's what I was waiting for.
Yeah, so there is a worldwide boycott actually going on against U.S. products, and as you can see from this here, a lot of it is actually working. As you can see, Tesla is way down, but other U.S. brands are too. Again, as like Canadians and Europeans and other folks. One of the things I think is that's also really significant that's happening in the economy is the idea that we've had this, everybody in the world has had this illusion for so long that, the US is the center of the global economy. And one thing I think we're seeing with the bond sell-off and with a lot of these boycotts happening is that the rest of the world is starting to realize, oh, we don't really need them, do we? And so, that's a big power of the boycott. I also want to shout out to the Black Americans who are on the Target boycott. Target has gone down precipitously, and they are in trouble because people are boycotting Target.
And Mel, I want you to put some context around that for viewers and listeners of Redneck Gone Green who may not be following that.
When Trump went into office, he basically, went on his anti-DEI campaign. And so, he said, oh, corporations, corporate DEI policies, whatever, they're a little weak anyway. But Target was one of the first companies to just roll over, which is significant because Target was actually one of the biggest retailers for Black businesses. And so Target didn't even blink. They just rolled over and gutted all of their DEI policies. And so, and because Target is a major retailer for Black businesses, a lot of Black churches and other organizations, including, Nina Turner was a big proponent to just boycott Target. And it is working. Target is really suffering right now because of, their willingness to roll over so easily for Trump.
So, Ted, I know that we're going to lose you in about 10 minutes. You let us know right up top. So I appreciate that. I want to make sure, though, to give you an opportunity for the work that you're doing, because, I think that you're unique. Again, you are an unabashed, proud leftist who is a political journalist. So I'm curious, as somebody who does a program of your own, as well as political journalism, what are you tracking that you think that me and other viewers, listeners of Redneck Gone Green ought to be paying attention to?
or doing or getting involved with?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've just been invited to speak in. I guess this is going to be around May 1st on International Workers' Day, which is in my hometown of Dayton, Ohio. NATO is having a big meeting there, and the local Daytonians are not liking it. They're organizing some big counter protests to NATO and trying to call them out and educate the American people about their, NATO's role as a, we think of them, many people think of them as, kind of maintaining the peace, but really it's a Cold War relic that in many ways makes the world more dangerous. You can look at Ukraine as an example, but it's it's provocative. It's, and it sort of sets up, a domino effect where, if you have 3 drunken border guards shooting at each other across a river at 4 o'clock in the morning, the next thing you know, ICBMs are flying from France and Britain towards Russia or whatever. And so anyway, I think it's really important to understand, for example, in the hands-off protests, one of the hands-offs was NATO. David Swanson, the peace activist, pointed that out to me, and I was like, "Are you kidding me? like you can be like why even mention them, right? Like, so we just need to have. I don't think we need a left where everybody agrees on everything and is on the same page about every issue. I don't think that's possible or desirable. But I do think that we need to try to. But I think that sort of the Russo-Ukrainian war has divided the left, and that's really unfortunate. And I'm not really sure what the solution there is. I think more facts tend to help when people kind of learn more about it. That helps. I think there's also just sort of a need to try to organize from the ground up. And I think we need a set of principles to organize around. I mean, I keep thinking if you had let's say the Democrats were to take over magically, you snap your finger, they have the same level of control that the Republicans have right now. They don't have a plan. There's no sense that they would do anything. I don't think they would do anything. And I don't, but the problem is, we don't have a unified umbrella left-wing organization that can tell the American people, if you trust us with leadership, either by voting us in or whatever, what would we do exactly? I don't think people know that because it's never been articulated to them, and I think that's maybe job one.
So thank you for that, Ted. And I'm gonna in the closing minutes, I'm gonna do my best to lay out what me and the comrades that I work with at the People's Network for Land and Liberation and the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network describe a 5-point program for actually winning a new world. Mm-hmm. And it starts with land. We have to decommodify land and return it to right relationship and balance. And that means not only for the earth, for the practice of traditional ecological knowledge, but to build community land trusts, to take it out of the commodity market so that housing is a fundamental human right, and that we grow food using, whether you call it agroecology or permaculture or indigenous rights. What you were talking about is growing food for use value rather than commodity value. And what I'm trying to do in the closing minutes of this program is to break it down without dumbing it down and talk about what actual socialism would look like in this country. And that means food, housing, healthcare are fundamental human rights, but we can build that from the bottom up. We don't have to wait till we seize the means of production. We can literally create the means of production from the bottom up, building pirate republics, building liberated zones. What we can do is create digital fabrication centers, turn every yard into a farm, turn every factory or every garage into a factory, and use 3D printers and laser cutters and begin to create the things that we actually need. But wait, there's more. We need to do political education that, again, breaks it down without dumbing it down, helping people to understand what social reproduction actually means, so that ordinary folks can understand how the world operates. We need to explain to people what use value versus commodity value is, why capitalism is destroying the planet and creating a racist, sexist, and class oppressive society. We need to explain to people why to be an actual leftist is a good thing, and it means you have to be anti-imperialist. We have to engage in art and culture, not just to make things beautiful, but to embrace the idea that if it's not soulful, it's not strategic. The point I'm making, Ted, is I think the left, the real left, small as it is, does in fact have a vision for a new world, but too many of us have been cowed by the corporate media and to think that we cannot actually say what we're for. Well, here on Redneck Gone Green, I'm going to say what I'm for. And what I'm for is a revolutionary restructuring of society that actually puts human needs before corporate greed. I don't think that capitalism can be reformed any more than I think white supremacy can be reformed or settler colonialism can be reformed. I'll end it with this. I think that we are approaching a Gramscian conjuncture where we're going to either win everything or nothing. Mm-hmm. And I wish that I saw it differently, but y'all, this is the moment. And so I'm going to invite you, Ted. I hope you'll come back onto this program. I know we're about to lose you. You told me that you had a heart out. I just want to thank you again for joining us on this conversation, and thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you so much. I totally agree with everything you just said. We just need to start people. I mean, Americans are constantly told that they don't, you're not entitled to anything. You shouldn't expect anything. It's like, that's exactly the opposite. I mean, for being a human being in the richest country that's ever existed in the history of mankind, you are entitled to the things that the basic necessities of life: food, water, transportation, education, healthcare. I'm probably leaving a few other things out. Safety, security. You're entitled to those just for being alive. You don't have to work hard. You don't have to impress anyone, just for being alive. That's what socialism is.
That's exactly right. And we mentioned the French a couple of times. I want to remind folks of the great call of the French situationist who said, be reasonable, demand the impossible. That's, I think, what ought to be our refrain. Mel Figueroa, I want to give you a few opportunity for some closing remarks as well. And I want to let you remind you, how can readers, listeners, viewers of Redneck Gone Green subscribe to Tracking the Crisis? You are muted. Bye, Ted.
Sure. If you want to, bye, Ted. If you want to put up that slide, just basically go to trackingthecrisis.org and just go in there. You can see archived ones if you want to like review some of the stuff from the last weeks, and also put your email in the subscribe box, and then you'll get an email in your inbox every Friday with the week of the news of the week.
Thanks, Mel. And I think that Shane and I have been talking about how valuable this Tracking the Crisis has been, including the movement response. Maybe we can have this as an ongoing segment. Can we do that with you?
Sure.
Fantastic. Shane, looky here, man. I want to thank you, Mel Figueroa. Before we end it, I want to ask you how you felt. How did this conversation go for you, man? My Mississippi redneck, I always like to ask, did this make sense?
Yeah, I mean, dude, we went through so much, and thanks to Mel for facilitating a lot of it. I wish we had had more time to go back through some of the issues that she was raising, and some of the ideas that were rolling through my head at the same time. I keep thinking about, well, I have a lot of people asking me as a veteran what I feel like, how I feel in this given climate that we're all in, and how I see things coming down the pike. And I really appreciate Ted's comment about feeling patriotic and having to stay here and fight, because I feel the exact same way. This country has a lot of flaws. It is not the same country that I put on a uniform to defend, but it could be a better country than the one that I put on a uniform to defend. And that's why I would happily do it again. I wish we could, maybe, at some point, we're going to have that discussion about what Shane thinks about the military's role in all of this and how we are going to actually defend ourselves against these little ice goon bitches and move forward from there. But all in all, I thought it was great. I was happy to have Mel do her tracking the crisis, and I hope everybody out there watching and listening paid attention to the URL, goes and signs up. It's a great resource and a great tool. And also to that note, don't forget to check out Democracy at Work and everything we got going on coming down the pike this week. We got a lot of things coming down. Professor Richard Wolf's going to be giving a live presentation here in Manhattan, or actually in Brooklyn, April 30th. So I wish you would be here for that. But other than that, man, onward and upward, right?
Keep on keeping on. Folks, I hope you join us. Remember, Shane and I join you every Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern here on Redneck Gone Green. Next week, we'll be joined by Susanna Penfield of the Busted Chronicles. She brings together money, psychology, privilege, and a call to action. So with that, I want to thank everybody for what you're doing. Keep on keeping on, onward and upward. Peace.